Well, good afternoon, everybody. We apologize for just a couple minutes of delay there. I'm Rob Hogg, State Senator here. Welcome, for those of you who are not from here, to Senate District 33 in Iowa. So it's great to have you, and it is great to be here for today's Climate Roundtable. And on the campus of Coe College, one of our great private colleges in Iowa, and specifically in Cedar Rapids, it's the Cohawks, the toughest bird in the world. I want to thank the E-Club and the Environmental Studies program for sponsoring today's event. And this is going to be a very efficient event. Hopefully we'll keep it moving and be able to have some time for questions and answers. Let me just start by saying this, Senator Gillibrand. In a city which suffered unprecedented flood damage in 2008, a $5 billion disaster in a city of 125,000, and if I can do math, that's $40,000 per resident. People lost their homes, businesses, churches, nonprofits, virtually every major facility of city and county government was damaged. Then again in 2016, we had the second biggest flood on record here in Cedar Rapids, and fortunately that one turned out better, but it was lower. And we survived that. We know that the risks with climate change are very high. In Iowa, we also know there are many solutions that work. They work not only to deal with climate change, but they also work for jobs, businesses, farmers, consumers, and our health. So it is an important issue that we discuss in greater depth than sound bites and 30-second commercials. Iowa, I like to say Iowa is first in the nation along with New Hampshire because we do it best. So I'm very, very honored to have you here today. Our special guest today is a native of upstate New York who won a heavily Republican congressional district in 2006 and was reelected in 2008 when the United States Senator was appointed Secretary of State, and our guest was appointed to the United States Senate in 2009. At that time, she was the youngest senator in the United States Senate. Wow. In 2010, and again in 2012, and again in 2018, she was elected to the United States Senate. In 2012, she was elected just 1 week after Superstorm Sandy hit and brought so much devastation to New York and other parts of our country, receiving over 72% of the vote and winning all but 2 of New York's 62 counties. Her husband is Jonathan. They have 2 school-age boys, Theo and Henry. Did I get that right? Yeah. I will note, she is a month and a half older than me. My youngest is starting college this year, so kind of exciting.
It started before I did.
Yeah, I did. We're delighted to have you here today, especially on this auspicious occasion when you've announced your climate change, well, I'll let you talk about, but your climate change plan. So without further ado, let me introduce Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Thank you. So I just want to thank this panel of experts that's with me today. I want to thank you for your leadership and your vision and for telling the stories of the families here who have been so devastated by global climate change, by severe weather, by flooding. I've been able to meet with some families in Iowa since I've been campaigning for the presidency about their lives and how flooding has destroyed it. I met with one family, Fran and Jason Parr, and their house was flooded. The water just deluged the house. When we walked in for the first time, Fran had not seen her home. There was mud everywhere. It was on, the refrigerator was literally tipped upside down because there was so much flooding. The mud was everywhere. The dishes were broken. The mud covered the walls. It covered everything they owned. And I can tell you, it was the hardest thing for her to see this home that she built so devastated. And it was very traumatic. And for families in Iowa that have now seen record flooding more than once in the last decade, it's really troubling because we have to actually have resiliency. We actually have to have prevention. I've been serving on the Environment and Public Works Committee for a decade now in Washington. And so I came to Iowa for a field hearing to talk about what this flooding has done to farmers and to business owners and to families in Iowa. And I can tell you, some of the information we learned was not good. We learned that the Army Corps of Engineers sometimes doesn't even have authority to come in and clean up these places in the way it needs to be done, that they don't have authority to actually invest in prevention, that it can only be temporary. So when we wanted to create resiliency and to have embankments set up and to have a long-term strategy to protect against the next flood, they couldn't spend money on that. And we also learned that a lot of the formulas that Washington uses harm rural communities, that you get less money. And so we put together a whole list of things that we're going to work on to get done to change the rules. Superstorm Sandy was crushing for New York. It is not dissimilar what happened here, but I met with families who lost their children because the water was 10 feet high, and I met the mother who literally was trying to carry her 2 toddlers to safety, and the water literally pulled them out of her arms. So if anybody wants to tell you global climate change isn't real, or that severe weather doesn't destroy families and communities, they just haven't talked to people who have suffered. And I can tell you, it's crippling. And so I think the most comprehensive platform for how we deal with global climate change, taking it head on as the greatest threat to humanity that it actually is, and use every gift and advancement and technology and entrepreneurialism and efficiency that we've ever seen and make it even greater. I think that tackling global climate change should be the moonshot of this generation. Because you remember when John F. Kennedy said, I want to put a man on the moon in the next 10 years, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And it'll be a measure of our efficiency and our entrepreneurialism and our effectiveness, and we're going to actually win. He made it a competition. It became the space race with Russia. So why not, instead of a space race with Russia, have a green energy race with China? How about take on the whole globe, the whole world community, and say, this is going to be a measure of how successful you are as an economy, how successful your engineers and mathematicians are, how big your vision is, and how entrepreneurial your spirit is. It's a race we're going to win, and I would take China on any day, on anything, and show that our engineers and our mathematicians are better, stronger, and more visionary than anyone in the world. And that's it. So you can, as president, you can use the bully pulpit to say, this is going to be a vision for our whole generation. We're going to ask every mathematician, scientist, and engineer, every business, every community to pitch in and solve the problem. And in Iowa, you've got rural America. You've got farmers. You've got people at the cutting edge of biofuels. And you have the same needs that every other community in the country has. Clean water. The fact that you have PFOA and PFAS in your water, the fact that you have nitrates in your water, you have a right to clean air, clean water. So I'm going to tackle global climate change by investing in our infrastructure that everybody needs, investing in the green jobs and the green job training that we need, and investing in clean air and clean water, and transform our economy by creating more jobs, more people who can participate, go into rural areas, go into communities at the front line that have been left behind, make sure all that worker training goes for good so anybody who wants to be part of this renewable economy can be. That's how you get it done. And I have about 20 big ideas and lots of specific ideas and how to pay for it that we can talk about today, but that's my vision. Let's have the green energy race of tomorrow starting right here in Iowa.
All right, so I've assembled a few people who live in the area who have some role in what I call the fight against climate change and the fight for a sustainable future. And I'd like to start by introducing, right here from Coe College, Professor Mary Knudsen. She has her PhD in Applied Economics from the University of Minnesota, professor here of Business Administration and Economics for 17 years. And the way I know Mary best is she has taught a series of May term classes focused on business, climate, and sustainability, which I've gotten to visit with her students a few times. And let me turn the mic over here to Mary.
Thanks, Rob. It's a pleasure and honor to be here, and I've been asked to be here today to talk about how college students view climate change. And like Rob said, I teach this class, a May-term class. I've taught it since 2010. It's called Economics and Ethics of Alternative Energies. It's been interesting to see how the field has changed in those 9-10 years. And the goal of the course is to teach about different alternative energies through the eyes of an environmental economist and a policymaker. And to achieve this goal, to help achieve it, we go on several field trips to see the production and the regulation of alternative energies and of policy in Iowa. Now, Iowa's a great place to do this, of course, because we're a leader in both the production of alternative energies and an alternative energy policy. We are second in the nation for electricity produced from wind. Around 36% of our electricity comes from wind. And we're first in the nation to write a state renewable portfolio policy standard in 1983.
Great.
So let me tell you some of the places we visited and you get an idea of what technologies we have. We've toured the University of Iowa's physical plant, so we see firsthand how energy is made. Here we have about 25% of the electricity or energy made from that plant is from renewables, from several sources, some from oats, some from miscanthus. We've toured Kirkwood. Miscanthus is a perennial grass. It grows about this tall.
Is it called switchgrass or is that a different grass?
That's a different grass.
Yeah.
But on the right track.
Yeah.
Well, I heard about that,
Yeah.
for cellulosic ethanol.
They have worked with Iowa State, in fact, to get this to find the right variety, what would be best as a
Yeah,
biomass. We've toured Kirkwood's turbine program. They train wind technologists, and they also have a 2.5 megawatt turbine. We visited the solar farms of Alliant Utility, so we visit a utility. This is in Dubuque. That covers 21.2 acres. It's 5 megawatts. It would service 727 homes. We have visited the Farmers Electric Cooperative in Kelowna. It was established their solar array farm in 2008. They are extending it this year. It's 2 megawatts. That would service about 200 homes, and they are second in the nation in providing watts per customer. And I should add that both the University of Iowa as well as Alliant are planning to be off coal within the next few years. Intermixed in this, we've had guest speakers like Rob here, Dave Osterberg, Zach Walls, and visits to such places like the Midwest Independent System Operators, which is in Minneapolis, which they oversee the grid. We see a big picture, we see the load. If you want to have a transmission line put up, they're the ones you go to. And we've talked with the utility board in Des Moines. So through these visits, we get an idea of what this technology is, and from the grid until switching your lights on. Now, I have just a few things to say about policy, just very few. Students also understand the importance of policy. It plays in producing and adopting these technologies. They support state and national production tax credits to ensure continual production and adoption of renewable clean energies. On a national level, they favor carbon tax over cap and trade, and feel it's necessary to have such a tax to increase carbon prices to encourage a decrease of carbon production and encourage technological change and the creation of new jobs. And then on an international level, they feel strongly the U.S. play a key role in leadership in guiding good climate change policy.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mary. Thank you for this thought. One of the things Mary and I have talked about is how young people especially really want to see Washington act on this issue because, this is an issue they worry about,
definitely.
right? Yeah. Next, I'd like to introduce Jerry Schnorr. Jerry is the co-director of the Center for Global and Regional Environmental Research at the University of Iowa. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering, a professor of engineering. What kind of engineering? Environmental engineering at the University of Iowa. He served as the chair of our Iowa Climate Change Advisory Council from 2007 to 2010, back when Democrats were in charge of the state, and we actually talked about climate change. And I will say he is the person in Iowa working on climate change that I've known the longest, because I remember in the early 90s, my dad made me go in and meet Professor Schnorr. So without further ado, Jerry, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks for putting this panel together and inviting us, and for Senator Gillibrand to be here. I guess my role, as he said, is to be the egghead professor on this panel. So please forgive me, I'm supposed to say a little bit about the science of climate change. And I do feel like much of it you know already. You've experienced it here in Cedar Rapids with the 2008 flood and all the frequent storms and events since then. You know already that we have about a 37% increase in the most severe precipitation events, roughly since about 1980. 100 years ago, if you look in the record at Cedar Rapids, it goes back that far, more than that. You're hard pressed to ever find a 4-inch rainfall event. That's about 100 millimeters. Now, a 4-inch rainfall event is very common almost every year. And we suffer from 25-year floods every year and 100-year floods every other year, as you know. So precipitation has increased a lot. And I guess my role is to also say, according to the forecast, it's going to get much worse. It's going to get much worse if we don't begin to act. And the window for when we act is closing. That's why the moonshot, Senator Gillibrand, is so important. That's why action now, at all levels, individual, we all have a carbon footprint to be concerned about. Really, the action at the moment is with the cities and the regions and the states, but hopefully federal action. I can't believe we still don't have a comprehensive energy legislation at the federal level and no comprehensive climate change plan. It's a disgrace.
We tried, it's the lifetime of my public service, because the funny thing is I literally ran on this very idea in 2005 in my 2-to-1 Republican congressional district in upstate New York, and it resonated. It was all about a green economy, it was all about green jobs, putting people back to work through green jobs. It was the whole thing. We didn't have this global climate change report, so the urgency for me then was getting off Middle Eastern oil and having energy independence and making sure that we can have a renewable future, not a carbon-based future. And so the urgency was there too, but it was a different reason. Now we have this report, and it says if we don't do something right now, you will see people suffer on a level you can't even imagine today. You will see people leave areas of the world, of the globe, because they'll become absolutely uninhabitable. You'll see these floods all the time, not even every 1 or 2 years. You'll see them all the time. You'll see these record-breaking heat that we've seen. You'll see the wildfires. You'll see the tornadoes. You'll see it all, and it will be devastating. So yeah, it's shocking. And so in 2006, we tried to pass in the House a very comprehensive green energy bill. It was a lot of the stuff we're still talking about today, but the Senate couldn't get it done. And so we did nothing. So I don't think we've done anything really major that I've been able to be part of in the last decade. And that's why you need presidential leadership. You need a president who will make this your moonshot. You need a president who will put the full weight of the federal government, every policy that a president's responsible for, to be part of this. When I'm negotiating a trade agreement, I'm going to make sure I will only negotiate a trade agreement if you're willing to meet these global climate change goals. It's going to be necessary to do business with the United States to take this seriously. That's how you do it. You create real national, worldwide leadership around a vision that takes this seriously. And I'm definitely the person to do it.
Thank you.
I think the urgency is very evident, as you say, yeah. Senator Gillibrand. In fact, I think yesterday the BBC ran an article that we really only have 18 months left, and that's with the perspective that if by now, I got to go to the 2015 Paris climate talks, where the one agreement that we did sign was implemented. It was like watching sausages being made, as you can imagine. But everybody did agree to it, and Obama administration signed it. But it doesn't go far enough. And in fact, by now we should already have seen a leveling off and beginning of a decline in global greenhouse gas emissions, and it hasn't happened yet. In fact, in Iowa, it's gone up 2% in the last year. So that's the first thing we got to do, and then a 45% reduction by 2030. Yes, it is urgent, but there is a rainbow at the end of it. That is enduring. That is the jobs that can be created. We've already done it in Iowa. We're the beneficiary of a wonderful wind economy. Solar is the missing piece for us, and it really fits well We need to go there, and we need to go there fast. Energy efficiency, battery technology, it's going to be the engine that creates the jobs, economic opportunity, as you say, for the future.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. Our next guest is a real working person, Laura Krause, as opposed to egghead professors. That's correct, Jerry. Laura Krause, who's the owner and operator of Abbey Hills Farm near Mount Vernon, a leading local food and community-supported agriculture producer. She has also been elected multiple times as our Lincoln County Soil and Water Conservation Commissioner and is currently serving as the chair of that. And Laura does need to leave a little early so she can get back to her customers. So, without further ado, Laura Krause, thanks for being here.
So, you know, some farmers for some time have said there couldn't be climate change, and then maybe there's climate change, but we didn't do it. And now I think everyone agrees that there's climate change. And if anyone doesn't agree, they need to come spend about 3 days with me and they'll experience it, because we deal with unexpected dilemmas and disasters all the time. It rains too much, it's too cold, it's too snowy, it's too hot, it's too dry. And worst of all, this is something you're not going to think of, night temperatures have increased and relative humidity has increased, and so crop diseases are far worse than they used to be. So diseases that I never thought I'd have to deal with, now we deal with regularly. So it's an ongoing fight to figure out how are we going to produce food when we can't predict when the frost is going to come with any sense of certainty. We can't predict when the ground is going to thaw in the spring. We can't predict when the hot weather is going to come. This year for farmers is a particularly bad perfect storm because we had very cold soil, very cold wet soil for a long, long time in the spring, which delayed planting, and then that delays pollination until August, July or August, when the very hot weather comes, and pollination is always harmed by high temperatures and stress, weather stress. So it's the worst case scenario. You delay planting, which delays pollination, which harms crop growth. And that happens when you have a cool, wet spring and a hot, warm summer. And I usually write down the rain on my calendar, but I actually stopped writing it down this spring because it didn't seem like it was going to ever end. And then one day it did, and it's never going to rain again. So I think it's been 6 weeks since we've had a rain event greater than 1/10 of an inch. And corn and soybeans have been bred to deal with that, but my crops, vegetables, we can't handle it. It is dry as a bone where the roots of vegetable crops are. And so the food that you like to eat, that's the stuff that is highly at risk that when there's unexpected and unplanned weather events. So the good news is soil soaks up carbon. Like the absolute best thing in the whole world is to let soil soak up carbon, and it can do it kind of fast. Soil and living plants. And so farmers have the key to taking carbon out of the atmosphere on a massive scale. But we have to be incentivized to do it.
Yes.
Right now, we are incentivized to produce cheap corn and soybeans and cotton and all that, all the commodities. So we're incentivized to do that, and the beneficiaries of that are the grain exporters, the giant livestock integrators, and the giant food processors. The people who suffer from that are rural communities and farm family income and the environment. Not a people, but the environment suffers because of that, because we mine our environmental resources to sell them cheap to someone who makes the money farther up the chain, not on the farm. So we have to be, and we do that because we are incentivized by the farm programs. We don't do that because we like it, and we don't do it for any irrational reason. We do it because the farm programs incentivize corn, soybeans, cotton, canola, rice, wheat, those crops in the United States, because we get a subsidy for crop insurance. So if weather's going to be awful, then you certainly want to have crop insurance. And to pay for it, there's help from the federal government. I should add, who else benefits from this is the giant insurance companies also.
Yes, and
So-
the guaranteed profit margin
They do fine.
they get to offer crop insurance.
Yeah.
The whole system's rigged, especially in Washington. And every time that bill gets written, it's a disgrace. They guaranteed a 12%, no, let her finish, but they guaranteed a 12% profit margin in the last farm bill. What industry in America gets a guarantee of a 12% profit margin? One that's well connected with the Ag Committee in Washington DC, whose lobbyists spend millions and millions of dollars on campaigns and influencing election outcomes. That's who gets it, because they have an outsized influence. So I'm with you.
Yeah. So farmers, like many people, resist change, and but we got to have some cultural change real fast, and technology change real fast. And the way to make that change happen is to incentivize the things that will work to accumulate carbon in the soil and help rural communities survive. Okay, so I have some ideas. And also, true that what we do to capture carbon and put in the soil also protects water quality. So everything that we can do to improve soil health and improve the risk of, or decrease the risk of climate change also improves water quality. So we can do conservation tillage.
Yep.
We know how to do it. The technology is readily available. Everybody can manage it. There doesn't need to be any public money
Tell us
spent
what
on
that
it.
is. Just
It's when you, instead of doing tillage in the fall, like for example, you'll see fields in the fall that have been tilled black, say don't do tillage till spring, or don't do tillage at all, so you would no-till. There's a special kind of planter that can be set up that can plant seeds into the stubble of last year's crop. And so you cut soil erosion literally like by 95%. And you cut runoff by probably as much as 60% after 2 or 3 years of no-till in the same field. So it's hugely important
that'll help the
technology.
nitrates problem. If you
It,
can reduce
it could, yeah.
You could reduce runoff, that has to
Absolutely,
help,
and
right?
surface water for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe, groundwater, maybe, I don't know, but
Maybe.
for sure. So, some people are kind of opposed to it because it requires use of weed killers, because there is no tillage. So you use weed killers to kill the weeds rather than the machinery and the tractor. But in this case, I think it's maybe the trade-off we need to make. We also need programs and policies that promote keeping roots in the ground year-round. So we need cover crops growing on soil all the time. We need huge promotion of cover crops, much more than we have now. And we also need to promote trees. There was an article in Science last month about what would happen if this major tree planting event worldwide could be accomplished and how much carbon that would suck out of the atmosphere. That's something we can do, certainly. We need managed grazing of livestock. Instead of keeping livestock concentrated in small spaces, we need to spread them out over the landscape so that they provide environmental services rather than expenses. And we need more crop diversity, more crops in the rotation, so that it's not just corn and soybeans, but we grow hay and vegetables and fruits and all kinds of other crops. And we also need incentives to produce solar and wind energy. And that includes at the Iowa legislature, by the way. We need to keep those incentives to make sure that farmers are able to do solar energy projects. And so if we reward farmers for providing environmental services and not just production, they'll change. They'll change fast. And for me, that seems like the fastest way to make the changes we need.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Just a quick note on that. There was legislation this year to take away some of the programs that have promoted solar energy, and unfortunately the Senate passed that, but thanks to the House of Representatives, we were able to get that stopped. I want to recognize State Representative Art Stade. Thank you for being here. And now I will introduce our next panelist. Jim Hodina is the manager of Lynn County Public Health's Environmental Health Program, past president of the Iowa Environmental Health Association, another elected official on the College Community School Board. He's joined here today by his director, Pramod. Thank you, Pramod, for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim to talk about some of the things he's been working on.
Thank you very much. I was taken by a lot of the comments on what we need to do. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we as a local government, a local public health agency have done, and maybe even inspired others to do the same. In 2016, I believe, if I got the year right, 2016, the Paris Accord, of course. We pulled out, and then shortly thereafter, the Linn County Board of Supervisors made a statement saying we're still in, and supporting the Paris Accord. So we're very, very proud of that. But it didn't stop there. The county has taken on many measures to try to promote renewable energy, particularly with solar, and here most recently with wind power. They have adopted building codes and to promote and make it easier to install residential solar on your house, and as well have more recently planned for the expansion of wind energy in Linn County. As you know, in Iowa, it's mostly to the west where the wind profiles are better suited for wind turbines than they are here on the east, but we expect that they're coming, and so we're preparing for that. At Linn County Public Health, we had the opportunity to promote residential solar, to get people together and through a combined effort, get a group rate and buy solar for their own homes. And so we did that. We were the first one, county, local health department for sure, in Iowa to start that. And in 2017, we had over 100 residents sign up. We had 600 megawatts of installed solar. And from that, we had a variety of environmental benefits.
Kilowatts.
Or did I say megawatts? Yeah. Kilowatts. That would be great. We've only have 100 megawatts of installed solar in Iowa, so that's obviously not the case. From there, the next year, Johnson County, hey, our neighbors to the south, they saw it. They liked it. They did it.
Great.
They installed 1 megawatt of capacity. And it's now been done in Blackhawk County, in Dubuque County, and we're back here doing it again.
Great.
And so through this continued effort, we can see that we're actually implementing solar power for residents. We've had also, of course, environmental benefits. I'm asked, okay, so why is public health involved with this? We have, and I can understand why the installers would want to be involved. I can understand why residents want to purchase it and offset some of their higher electric costs. Why would a health agency be involved? Well, we also run a local air quality program here in Linn County with Linn County Public Health, and that means administering the Clean Air Act requirements. And so we have goals around reducing air pollution. The first year in 2017, through our 100 residents and 600 kilowatts of installed solar, we reduced carbon emissions annually by 1.5 million pounds a year. And that continues and continues. And by the way, they're saving money and on their utility bills and so forth. We've also have offsets because we reduced the demand on MISO, on our grid, to reduce sulfur dioxide emissions, nitrogen dioxide emissions, particulate matter emissions. And so that, again, supports not only our climate change initiatives, but also our clean air initiatives for improving the quality of air that we breathe every day. So those are some of the things that we're doing. And we think they've been very successful, and they've gotten attention around the state and nationally as well.
Well, thank you so much. We've got about 15 minutes left, Senator Gillibrand, and we've got some people in the audience who might have questions. And let me start. Let me start here with Bernard Clayton, and then we'll come down here to Steve, Jason, and we'll see who else we can squeeze in. So here we go. Bernard, what's your question?
My question is, first off, thank you all for doing a good presentation on climate change. My question is this. Well, I'm gonna start with a comment. That physical plant that you were talking about down at the University of Iowa, that was designed by a black man who who was from Ottumwa, Iowa.
Yeah.
And they're still operating today. Now, this moonshot that we're talking about, a massive educational investment was put into the country. Now, my concern is for the black and brown kids in this country, their education, even in cities like this, they are not performing. You, as president, how would you do the necessary investment and also encourage education for those individuals so their intellect could be applied to solving this problem?
Such a good question. So, my entire platform is around how are we going to do this as a nation together. And so I believe in national public service. And what that is for every young person in America who wants to go to college can get 2 years of, if they do 1 year of public service, they can get 2 years of community college or state school free. And if they do 2 years of public service, they get 4 years free. Wow. Now, the definition of public service includes all of the jobs in the renewable space. Any green energy job, any job in science, technology, engineering, and math that's going to be a gateway into these careers that we are going to fund. And part of the funding of my global climate change plan is to put in areas that have been left behind. Inner cities, rural areas, anyone who's been left behind in this economy, so that the business, black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses have access to the capital that's necessary to create these new businesses, to create these new technologies, to enhance entrepreneurialism and innovation in the sector. And so to all the questions we've had earlier, the way you'd fund it is that you'd invest in green energy sources. If you are a cellulosic ethanol producer and you're at the forefront of new biofuels, you'll get a much lower tax rate than the fossil fuel producers to incentivize you doing that. We'll make sure that when we're writing the Farm Bill, that we are actually going after the polluters and the programs that harm our water and increasing the programs that help our water. Making sure that farmers have the resources to do a new tillage technology, have the resources to plant trees, to have crops every season, to make sure that they're incentivized through tax policy and through grants to do the stuff that results in attacking aggressively global climate change. So for Black America, for young Black boys and girls, for young brown boys and girls, making sure that their public school has resources to teach them STEM. Because we know studies show that communities of color and girls are often left behind because their teachers don't say things like, you know, you're really good at math and you should focus on this for your career. And so I've had legislation over many years to invest in our public schools so that teachers can inspire all kids. You know, teaching the 3rd grader to build a rocket, teaching the 5th grader to build a robot, getting these kids into hands-on learning in every public school so they can imagine themselves as the inventor and the engineer. And the reason why I like to parallel this with the moonshot is exactly this. When John F. Kennedy said, I want to put a man on the moon in 10 years, not because it's easy, but because it's hard, it will be a measure of our innovation and excellence, he made sure every kid in America wanted to be an astronaut. He made sure every engineer and scientist wanted to be part of NASA. So as president, I will do the same. I will make sure every kid in every public school has the resources so that they get invested in STEM subjects, so they can imagine they're the one who's going to solve the problem. They're the one who's going to advance the next technology and work in these industries. And so you're going to gear your debt-free college idea to green energy, and also, not last, but very important, guaranteeing job training for anyone underemployed, which is a lot of people in Iowa, or unemployed. And what you do is you say to a worker who's making less than minimum wage or just a wage that's not commensurate with his or her abilities, you say, we will offer you through our community colleges, our state schools, and our apprenticeship programs, and our not-for-profits, job training in green energy fields. So that, for example, you're in a job that you think's dead end and you don't like, I want to become the next inventor to work on a farm to do biofuels. I just toured an ethanol plant, and that's exactly what they did. I asked every worker who was working there, how did you get this job? And every single one of them said, well, I got hands-on training. I was a farmer, and I just wanted to do something more, and I wanted to stay in the industry, so I came here and did an apprenticeship program. And now they're monitoring how we produce ethanol here in Iowa. So guarantee the job training, especially in these industries, so no one's left behind, especially communities that have been historically left behind, our communities of color, our low-income communities, and our rural communities.
Welcome to town. Excuse me, welcome to Cedar Rapids. By the way, good luck in the debate coming up soon.
Very excited.
Oh, that little thing.
That little thing, yeah. Rob kind of inspired me a few years back to get more interested in dealing with climate change. Okay. And one of the things that has come to my attention, many of us are thinking about, is a bill that's in the House. It has been in the Senate, I believe, last year, but we lost Jeff Flake, who was one of the co-sponsors, I believe. And what we need senators, bipartisan senators, to back a bill in the Senate. It's called the Energy, Innovation, and Carbon Dividend Act. And the fundamentals, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but for those in the room, the fundamentals of that are anybody who involves themselves in use of carbon, either bringing it out of the ground, importing, they pay a fee. We don't call it a tax anymore now, it's a fee. And that fee is collected and is distributed to every citizen over the age of 18 in the United States. Because when my company, for example, has to pay that fee, I'm going to charge more for my product. And that gives you, as a citizen, an opportunity to have the money you need to cope with that. So what I'm looking for is someone in the Senate, I'm sure you get behind it as a Democrat, but we need a Republican in the Senate. We've been talking to Chuck Grassley, the father of wind in Iowa, and we're very interested in finding a Republican who would work together with the Democrats to sponsor that bill in the Senate.
And this, of course, is the Citizens Climate Lobby legislation. Yeah.
So I'm just not familiar with which bill it is, so I may well be on it, I don't know. But part of this presidential platform is a price on carbon.
Right.
And that's the same exact thing, and what it is, it's $52 for every ton of carbon, metric ton of carbon. And that is the bipartisan, I think, maybe it's not bipartisan yet, but it is the bill that senators have been working on for a long time. And so that is part of my climate agenda. Because if you put a price on carbon, it allows market forces to work for you.
Right.
Because if you're a polluter, you're gonna pay, and if you're not, and you're an innovator, and you're in renewables, you're gonna get a lower tax rate. It's gonna be much less expensive to produce all the things that you wanna produce. So I'm gonna directly invest through a carbon tax in the industries that are solving the problem. And I'm gonna help entrepreneurs grow, I'm gonna help new businesses grow, and I'm gonna lower the tax rates and guarantee them for all renewable fuels. Because the worst thing Congress does is they dither. And when we used to have these tax deductions and tax credits and lower tax rates for renewable fuels, they didn't guarantee them. And they'd wait, and the tax credits would expire, and then the business would go out of business. I remember a senator going to the floor every week talking about how many wind jobs were lost that month around America, and you know where those jobs went? China. So they'd go to China, then China would be better positioned to do next generation innovation, which means they're gonna win the green energy race if we don't get ourselves moving on it. And so that's why I wanna create a guaranteed cost for polluters. And I wanna make sure they are the ones that are playing. I also have an idea to do an additional excise tax on fossil fuel production, which is an amount of money that just gets added on to every bit of fossil fuel production that's created.
The beauty of this bill is that the money that is collected is then distributed back to citizens across the United States. And the thing I like about it is it's revenue neutral.
Oh, I know, so that's the one where the money goes back to the people.
that's the one.
So the under my plan, the money goes back to be reinvested in the communities that have been disproportionately harmed. Because you have to recognize there has to be an environmental justice agenda. There has to be an environmental equity agenda. And so to the man who was asking specifically about communities left behind, Bernard, when you take that carbon tax and you actually take the money from your price on carbon, you're going to be reinvesting that in the job training for STEM subjects, for kids who are left behind, for the industries that are investing and doing new techniques for farming, the ones that are planting trees and are planting more crops that can be used to continue to address global climate change. So that's it. That money goes pouring right back into the people who are the innovators and who are the efficiency experts and the new businesses and capital into those communities. Because you need environmental equity as well as environmental justice. And also that money then can also be used to clean up all the water. You know, we have, how many communities do you know have tainted water? You've got communities where they're almost all on well water and there's nitrates in their water. You've got communities around military bases where you've got PFAS in the water, carcinogens in the water. That has to be cleaned up. And if you particularly go into an inner city or a lower income community, that's where we had industrial pollution for 100 years. And so there's environmental degradation in brownfields that you got to really go right after. And so that's how you redistribute that money back into the communities that you want to grow as part of your climate agenda.
And it doesn't cost the government a nickel. It's revenue neutral.
We're going to try to keep these questions really short. I'm going to skip you, Jason. I apologize.
I'll keep my answers.
I'm going to go to Diane and try to get promoted in. I do want to recognize Cindy Garlock, candidate for school board here. Thank you, Cindy. All right. So Diane, speak up and keep it really short.
Yes, sir. So, my name is Diane Gillibrand, and I've been working on climate issues for about almost 40 years. And we always talk about all that's to do, but sometimes we forget there's some legacy pieces that are still in place that are really negative and pernicious on us. And one of those specifically through the Department of Interior and on federal public lands, the rate at which industry, still mostly fossil, is able to access that land. Sometimes it's under $1 an acre. It is ridiculous that in 2019 we still have those rates that low. And so there's a lot new, but there's also a lot that still needs to be addressed. That's old. And
So I will eliminate those leases. I will end fossil fuel production leases on all federal lands.
Promote.
Pramod Trivedi with Lynn County Public Health. My colleague just spoke to you. Very happy that you are here and welcome to our community. So when internationally recognized expert on climate change, Dr. Snood, when he talks about, you know, the real impact of climate change, the real science behind climate change, why is it for you so difficult to convince your colleagues, United States Senate and House, to really come together and take care of this emerging and very bad thing that's going to happen? Not to us, maybe not in our life, maybe in our lifetime, but certainly in our kids and grandkids' lifetime.
It's the greed and corruption that is at the center of Washington. There is an underlying rot in Washington. That is the greed and corruption of industries. They care more about their quarterly profits than the health and well-being of the people they're supposed to be serving. And you named a bunch of them. You've got big fossil fuel industries that are absolutely dead set on polluting air and water at all cost, that will fight tooth and nail. You've got big ag that doesn't want to actually spend money on all these great ideas that you just came up with. And you've got a lot of corruption through money in politics. So I'm the only presidential candidate who actually has a comprehensive bill to have publicly funded elections. You gotta get money out of politics. You think any of this is gonna be easy and you don't get money out of politics? That's why I have colleagues who don't do the right thing. Colleagues don't do the right thing because they're bought and paid for by big industries. And so getting money out, having publicly funded elections, putting the power back into the democracy, the power of our democracy back into your hands, that's the solution. And it's the corruption of Washington. It's really about greed. And so you got to go after a lot of these big industries that get to rig the system and want the status quo. They want that federal lease, just like the woman who previously spoke up. They want to have that cheap land and cheap access to fossil fuels. Keep it in the ground.
All right. That's going to have to be the end of our discussion. People will get a chance to individually visit with Senator Gillibrand. And I'm going to turn it over to Ashley here just really quick.
So to get everybody out of this quite warm room, which is oddly relevant to our topic, we are going to actually have a photo line out here. So if everybody could stay seated for just a second so we can get that set up and then move through seamlessly and everybody can get a picture with Senator Gillibrand and have a moment to speak with her. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.